Today, I want to tell you about the scariest novel I've ever read. That would be Wolf and Iron by Gordon R. Dickson. Now, where to begin? This is a post apocalyptic survival, slightly adventure novel from 1990, about 470 pages. And this has got to be the most scariest novel I've read to this point in my reading career because it's very believable. This uh, at this point being 2024 now, there would be more along the lines of suspending some of your disbelief by imagining an alternate timeline scenario, which could still similar things could still happen, but basically, truly bleak, truly post-apocalyptic, and the most lizard-brained story I've ever read. That's so subtly impactful. You can't tell if the author's intentionally writing extensively about the the sort of mindset it would take to survive, meaning emotional detachment from everything in an extremely solemn manner in which you feel as though you're becoming like an animal, which is one of the background themes that is so effectively rendered in the companionship between a man and a wolf. Without any spoilers here, that's part of the meta of the story as well. But that if that sounds romantic, it's it's really not. This feels like the style of a realistic hard sci-fi in a setting with almost nothing political or preachy to say outrightly. The scary part is that it's all implied by what opposition occurs to the characters in this story. Um, it's very immersive, almost to the point where you feel a great depression and an unease and a sense of your own mortality, seeing it through the characters' eyes and how they process realistic, um, sometimes psychological, but mostly the the opposing, I guess you could say, the opposing elements of nature and the bad nature in people. An example I want to give you. Um, I have never been more immersed and sickened and scared by what I know is possible in the event of a total breakdown in society where there's complete anarchy. There's roving gangs that have um, little resources, but as is proven throughout history in similar scenarios where a civilization is entering a breakdown, what people would be capable of doing and the nature of how I would have imagined that in a post-Western civilization collapsing type setting, if that makes sense. And for some reason, it's the less is more detail of the way that emotional, non romantic approach by which Gordon R. Dickson describes some of these very short segments in the novel when such violence does occur, that sends shivers down my spine, to the point where there is that feeling of wondering, like, how many, if any, goodwill type people are left in this world, especially when the bad side of human nature has evolved, or arguably, philosophically, paradoxically, devolved to contest what is arguably true human evolution. So all humanity takes a complete back seat and this is all more or less implied. I don't know how much of it was intentional, but I would say this book is a work of genius, and this is what I originally was sought out for. I wanted to be challenged because I like immersive novels that, regardless of genre or any sort of other type of influencing intent of the novel, whatever. books that immerse me to the point of feeling dangerous and being challenging. At least that's what I've been into lately. Although I'll read anything good, and I have very wide-ranging tastes. Damn, this book though, it really puts you there. It's similar. If I were to describe it with a metaphor, it would be like um, enduring a serious disease that you're pretty sure you can diagnose it and you know what it is and you have a few ideas about treatment, but you're stranded and you're camping and you're really really far from your car and you're too weak to get to your car. Time slows down. You always have this sort of on edge background adrenaline where sleep is never good enough. You're constantly thinking about how much like food you have and that sort of thing. And there's this very humilifying, solemn awareness that your lifespan is not going to last. It's like a confrontation with death. So I have never done so much research to find a book like this because that's what I was looking for, and then found it pretty much exactly what I wanted and totally got my fix in that sense. So I would have to give this story personally, my personal rating, a 10 out of 10. As in comparison to other post-apocalyptic adventure stories, um, I would imagine commercial audiences would give this more of a 7, but that's because people that truly love the sort of bleak survival post-apocalyptic stories is a very small audience comparatively to what most people like, I think, based on my understanding and research of what present culture and audiences like and value. So it's a very lonely experience to read this book in ways that are layers of meta. I think it's underrated though, and I wish that the reason why I feel that this is spiritually and politically relevant to today, similar in the same vein of the same feeling of something like The Time Machine by H.G. Wells, is that it's that total absence of fantasy and confrontation with potential for negative states of existence to remind us of what really matters, to try to help steer society in any way we can, especially through cooperation, putting aside our differences, that sort of thing. I know it sounds like altruistic corniness, but it's true. In order to avoid any future outcome in which the bad will or the very nature of humanity is ultimately what takes over, and communication, humanity, industry, art just takes a backseat for lizard brain survival, might is right mentality, a resurgence of the Dark Ages. This book calls it the Iron Years, and it essentially the Iron Years have returned. So this book genuinely gives you that feeling of being constantly gloomy and just covered in shadows with the encroaching imminent reality of death and your own very very much man versus environment, or human versus environment sort of thing. Most likely, just to be honest, probably more men are going to be interested in reading this sort of book than women. It tends to focus excessively on reconsidering the importance of very practical technologies which modern Western people since 1990 until now have totally sort of taken for granted, in the sense that we've become so dependent on systems which are AI is a good example of that, pretty much left up to the original schematics of technologies that we are all most of us in the world today are dependent upon for survival, and the general economic system, which we also take for granted, being like dependent on our day-to-day supply and demand chains. Oh my gosh, is that what I think it is? Shut the fuck up. Okay, sorry about that. So, basically, yes, these characters, the main characters, feel more vulnerable and the future feels more uncertain than in any book I've ever read before. More so than The Time Machine by H.G. Wells or The Stand by Stephen King. I'm trying to think of other post-apocalyptic books I've read. Even The Road by Cormac McCarthy, another great book. I feel like this was much more intense because the struggle and the necessity for strength and the sacrifice of anything like excessively altruistic, especially in the main character being a once promising young college kid who's pretty brilliant but weak in other areas, like having to take a backseat for just what is most urgent and immediate in a world that is very easy to conceive of being just totally hostile, as now everything's in competition. And so that probably unintentionally also exposes the underlying spiritual problem with Western society. This taking for granted the importance of knowledge, which is another big underlying theme, and also is proven essential to humanity's evolution and so on and so forth. And so I would love to read more stories in this universe. And in many ways, it gave me the same feeling that The Last of Us video games had. I wonder heavily if this book or books like it had inspired the sort of grimness and brutality and bleakness of the similar post-apocalyptic set of settings. Although there's no zombies in this type of thing, there's no magic, there's nothing. um, Sci-fi or fantasy about this, and that's what makes it so good. That's what makes it so hard-hitting and a very like tough read in general. And so one of the criticisms, a lot of the forward prose concerns itself with that lizard brain survival mindset, which on the one hand I have to praise because it's immersive, but on the other hand, it's I'm assuming the majority of modern Western readers, who, if any of this has sounded interesting to this point to you, might kill your patience and just not be of interest to want to keep knowing what happens next. For me, it was good enough. I imagine, but I already had a bias for this type of thing, ultra bleak, post-apocalyptic settings. And this one in particular, like I said a million times already, but I can't say enough, was eerily real and plausible. But I will say one of the good redeeming qualities is it wasn't entirely without hope for humanity. And so I personally give this book an absolute 10 out of 10. Very memorable and very humilifying and genuinely terrifying for me personally. Thank you.